Welcome, everyone. I am Kavya Pearlman, founder and CEO of XR Safety Initiative, XRSI. Thank you for joining us today for this yet another effort to help build safety and privacy for the XR ecosystems. Together with me, we have today lots of people assembled here from various multidisciplinary backgrounds. And our objective and our mission and what are we going to do in the coming months and weeks, everything will be detailed out. For that, I have the program lead for XR Safety Initiative Privacy Safety Framework, Debra Farber, and my co-chair, Dennis Fox-Bonilla, who is going to be walking us through what this process is going to be, what are the various details, along with Deborah. So without further ado, I just want to say we're going to be covering a lot of different technologies, but this is basically a community effort. It is, we could never do this without you. So I really, really appreciate you guys taking the time to be here today and or afterwards listening to this recording to figure out where are we headed with this framework. This framework is now is our, you can say, third attempt, even though this is version 2.0, we made a second attempt. So the first attempt, we started to do the privacy safety when pandemic started in 2020. That was version 1.0, realizing the urgency of our times. And then last year we did 1.1, we never published anything. So this time we're going to do 2.0 version. It's a iterative updating process, and I'm sure Deborah and Dennis will talk to you about that. So over to you, Deborah.
Great, thank you so much, everyone, for being here. I am brand new to XRSI, so where Fox and Kavya have been leading this framework effort for well over a year now. I just, came in and as program lead because we're going to be taking the good work of this framework and then productizing it a little more, and I'll be kind of mapping it to other privacy efforts that are maybe, further left in the product development stack. So with this framework, you'll see we're talking about risk management, which is essential, but we also want to be able to, talk about privacy and safety a little further upfront in, and embed privacy by design. So I'll be kind of programmatically looking to kind of expand the scope of the work within privacy and safety. So you'll see we'll be coming up with a nifty name for the overall program, similar to the other XRSI programs as well. I just wanted to give my, a brief hello to everybody to let you know that I'm your new program manager, and reach out if you have any questions. But I'm going to turn it over now to Fox, who is going to drive from here.
Sounds good. So why don't we start kind of at the top with what we plan to do over the next hour. So we're going to give you a project description, just a little bit of background around what we've been able to accomplish so far. Kavya hinted at the different cycles that we've done. This is now the beginning of like the third cycle. We were going to try to publish a 1.2, but realized kind of the massive influx of inputs necessitated an actual 2.0 and a spinning out of one of the sections that we were working on. I'll describe that later. So a little bit about the project description. We'll be introducing the framework, what it is, how it's put together, and then our timeline when we're looking to actually complete this initiative. We will have a hard stop at the end of this year in order to complete this, and then just share some logistical information, contact information, and then if there are any questions, we'll do the best to answer them. This is meant to be as informative as possible. So if there are gaps or if there are pieces that you feel like we've missed, even during the presentation, please continue to ask them in chat, because we're here. We're trying to facilitate this so that we are all on the same page. If we could go to the next slide. Yeah, so what we're trying to do here is produce an XR risk management framework for privacy and safety. At its core, we essentially have these 4 sections that Deborah will be talking about, and they're our major focus areas. And what we're trying to do here is receive inputs from you all in order to finalize this by the end of October. And I'll talk a little bit about the folks that have joined us previously in this effort. If we go to the next slide. Yeah, so our active contributors, these are folks that have helped us over the last couple of years, nonprofits, universities, governments, private industry, labs, and corporations, think tanks. There have been government entities that have shown up to provide info and insight. And so it's a wide variety of stakeholders. We see this as a consortium of folks that really stand to lose a lot if there isn't this kind of privacy framework in place to inform their initiatives. So it's a wide variety of people. I'm sure if we just took a pulse on the room, there would be people from academia, there'd be people from private industry, from all over. I myself, my background, I started at NASA doing data visualization and then immersive systems. I now own my own private company. I'm also a professor at Arizona State University, so I have a little bit of many of those things, and we're always looking for stakeholders across a wide variety of industry and organizations. And so I'm going to pass it off back to Deborah to talk a little bit about how the framework is actually put together. So if we could go to the next slide, Deborah, take it away.
Sure, great. So we pulled in good work and flywheel, style from variety of sources. Some of this may look familiar. What we borrowed from NIST, we borrowed from e-safety initiative, the Australian e-safety initiative, and as well as some other areas to create a flywheel that makes sense, that that an organization can use to assess their risk, to then threat model and prevent that risk, to manage it, and then to inform the assessment again. So it's a continuous risk assessment framework that is mapped to areas that relate to AR, VR, right? What we're calling XR or metaverse, right? Several different names that we could use. Okay, go to the next slide, please. And then there are 14 functions altogether within these 4 focus areas that we've created as well. So Fox, you could, I guess, talk about now the controls and the way that we've mapped to these 14 functions.
Yeah, I think we can actually do that in a little bit. Yeah, there's actually a deeper dive that I've got after we do some interactive stuff.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. I thought it was the next slide.
No.
Well, on to you. Yeah.
I could take this slide, Fox and Deborah, because this is just, yesterday we kind of finalized and XRSI made a commitment. And this is not just yesterday, but we have been working with Australia's e-safety commissioner on various different goals. So Julie Inman-Grant, who is the commissioner of Australia, last year, in 2020, the commissioner is the first online regulator that has adopted some of the standards that we created to create a global positioning statement for VR and AR. On the 10th of December, we recommended that such type of a positioning statement for the metaverse should be made by most of the government to ensure they're going to protect human rights, vulnerable population, etc. And along the same lines, within the same duration, e-safety commissioner developed what is called the safety by design tools for prevention of harm. As you probably noticed when Deborah was explaining, that one of the 4 focus areas is prevention, because in the era of constant reality capture, you can't unsee things. So you have to be more proactive than preventative, more proactive and preventative. And that's why we have committed to adopting the safety by design principles by e-safety commissioner of Australia after looking at all the tools that are available. The commissioner herself says this is the this is the safety belt moment for the industry when it comes to the metaverse. And we are basically trying to synergize, trying to partner up with various regulators, but really delighted that the commissioner is taking the lead, and we're going to use the tools that they have built here and many other tools, GDPR, NIST, all kinds of mapping you'll be able to see with various different laws and frameworks that are coming about. Over to you, Fox.
Next slide. Just from a high level, there are 4 focus areas, 14 functions, 80 controls. We'll do a deeper dive. But first, since this is a this is about XR and interactive systems, immersive systems, we're going to do a little thing here where we've been going back and forth around nomenclature. And if we go to the next slide, we've labeled this as the XR Privacy and Safety Framework. But as we all know, in the last 9 months or so, there's been kind of a shift in naming. So we're going to ask you right now, and we're going to give you a link here to help us decide whether this should be the XR Privacy and Safety Framework or the Metaverse Privacy and Safety Framework. And so if you could all go to Menti, and then I believe the input is just these numbers that you see there. And we'll get some real-time feedback from you all instead of asking you via chat or for you guys to unmute. I think this will be a little more efficient. So if you could just go to that address and then those numbers, and all we're looking for is some insight as to whether you think it should be XR or Metaverse in the naming of this thing.
And I suppose the polling happens real time. So Bhanujit, if you want to switch to that Menti slide. And the numbers, can somebody, okay, the numbers are 6871-0823.
I'll paste them in there.
I got a vote.
There you go, we've got them in chat. Thanks. This is the type of feedback, I mean, at least like in real time, that's useful for us, so that we can gauge what you all are thinking, how are you using your taxonomies, and whether we're still in alignment. And we just want to make sure that we're sharing that same taxonomy, and that we're all using that same naming as the baseline. Cool. Yeah, I think we've got a pretty solid idea of what people's vibe is.
People have strong emotions about the metaverse.
Unless it flips at some point, I'm pretty sure we know where we're going. I think we can revisit this toward the end of the meeting, but it's pretty clear here. So thank you for that. That's immensely useful for us to be able to gauge that interest. So let's go back to the slides, and then the next slide, which is the timeline. Okay, so just generally, so you know what we're doing here, we're going to tackle those 4 major focus areas during this year. One of the difficulties that just to give you context, one of the difficulties we ran into on the previous initiative was that we were trying to do a lot of things in parallel, and we had different spin-off groups working on different sections. And what happened really toward the end of it was that there was suddenly this like wave of insight and this wave of interest. And we ended up getting many more inputs than we actually expected there toward the latter half of it. We had started with some academic partners, and it was great. It was awesome. It was a tidal wave of insight. So what we're going to do this time is that we're going to focus on these 4 focus areas. Right now, as we've planned it, the first 2 focus areas get, I believe it's 2 months each. And so this is the kickoff. We'll have content curation until the beginning, until the end of October. So we basically have until the end of October to tackle all those 4 areas. And then we go into tech editing and design. That lasts until the beginning of December. And then at the beginning of December, what we'd like to be able to do is launch the framework as 2.0. on Human Rights Day, which is also the beginning of XRSI Safety Week, which is on December 10th. And then there are things that we can do, outreach and delivery, some thoughts on International Data Protection Day, things like that, that we can do after the launch. And we can start to coordinate those later in the year. The focus here is to have pencils down by October 31st. We weren't so strict about it last time because we were getting incredible insights, but this time we're going to have to do kind of a hard stop there on October 31st. And so let me describe a little bit about what is in each section or how they're made up. So if we can go to the next slide. Right, so the four focus areas include assess, inform, manage, and prevent. Each one of these focus areas contains a set of functions, okay? These functions are a little bit deeper in the weeds, and then within the functions are controls. And I'll give you an example so it's not so vague here. Each component reinforces how organizations achieve privacy goals through aligning business strategy, roles and responsibilities, and activities to prevent harm to humans in XR environments. That's kind of like the guiding theme here. So we can go to the next slide. I'll show you how one of those focus areas is made up. So this one's on child safety. It turns out that we learned child safety was such a large topic or such a large idea that we actually have spun it out into its own program. So child safety no longer exists in the inform section, but I'm just going to show it to you as an example. So child safety is in the inform section, let's say. So that's IN. So the next acronym that it gets is the CS, which is child safety. So INCS. And then within INCS, you have these different controls. And just to give you an idea of one of the controls, it's establish mechanisms to create awareness and inform parents, guardians regarding privacy risks to minors. Okay, so that was a control. And within that control, we may have best practices. There may be data. You may all have done a study or have some kind of metrics that inform on how to set up, let's say, set a protection for that particular control. And so again, it's a focus area. And within that focus area, we have the function. And within that function, we're going to have a ton of smaller controls. And some of you will probably have more insight in some controls than others. And what we're looking for is to lean on you all around your expertise, because we're just really trying to be the funnel that insight pours into so that we can then publish this at the end of the year. Okay. So having heard that, knowing that there are these four areas that we're going to take about a year to get this done, 8, 9 months, that kind of thing, 10 months, something like that. Are you interested? Is this something that you'd consider to be committed to helping develop this framework? Like I said, the commitment typically means joining a weekly meeting, providing feedback within this effort to finalize this framework, which would be due and published by December 10th.
And
so
Bhanuji, you have to go to the second slide on Menti because it still shows the previous one.
Okay, so I'm going to paste that information here so you all have it.
So, okay, there we go.
All right, cool. I mean, you showed up to the meeting. You guys are I think digging, or at least in alignment with what we're saying. And again, we want to be able to guide this in a way that makes it so that we can finalize it by the end of the year. There may be gaps, there may be things that you see need improvement upon. We are open to suggestions and open to collaboration. This isn't like a monolithic thing. We want to be able to hear your insights. So we appreciate you all joining us. So if we could go to the next slide, I think we overwhelmingly have support on this for those folks that have joined. And so in order to be able to do this, Kavya, could you talk a little bit about the consent and interest forms, like why people should fill those out to let us know that they're interested in what the consent form means?
Totally. And Panajit, I think you're still not sharing screen, but whenever you get to it, that's fine. Otherwise, let me know. I could also share the screen for that matter. So the way, this is a very, almost like a gigantic elephant, and we're going to eat it piece by piece, not the literal, but metaphorically. So it will all begin with, we're trying not to overwhelm you with ton of notification. It will begin with filling out a interest form. As you probably all noticed, we didn't ask for any registration, and we're like, here is the link. Anybody, we tried to reach out to over 3,000 global researchers in various different media, LinkedIn, and email, all of that. And out of which, almost about hundreds of you have shown up. So this is really encouraging. Once you fill out this interest form, it will indicate to us which areas you may be interested in, or there is some other nitty-gritty. Once you start putting some of the input into these areas, you really have to request access so that we know that it is you who are requesting access to fill out any kind of component. You have to give us consent. This consent form does not take any of your intellectual property. It just says, we want to consent from you to use the elements that you are contributing. It's just a permission to use. And so that will allow us a seamless collaboration. I think those are the individual requirements at the moment.
Yep, totally. And so what we've done as well, and I'm not sure the mechanism by which we'll share this out, but we've set up a Notion document that actually is like the homepage for the entire process. It has links to all the focus areas. It has the ability to submit comments and inputs. And so I can't remember exactly how we're going to share that out, but we've put it into one place so that you have a single stop shop to be able to see how the different sections are being compiled and what people's inputs look like. So what Kavya was saying there too as well is that this is an incredibly transparent process. I mean, it will look, you will see a million different people contributing to the thing in real time every week. And then what we try to do is kind of congeal that down to the insights that we want to keep when we meet up every week. That's we kind of have like a small stand up just to know that we've got momentum, and then we kind of have a more formal meeting that's usually about an hour every week to formalize those inputs that we've received in the meanwhile.
And so like beyond individual, if you're looking to partner up, and we look for liaison. So when we launched the 1.0, our liaison were OpenAR Cloud, OARC, University of Michigan, and University of Georgia Tech. And in version 1.1, we had plenty more partners. University of New Haven kind of joined in. So and University of Glasgow, University of Santa Clara. So if you are any of these entities, basically not a for-profit. If you're not a for-profit, you can freely allow research to exchange back and forth, reach out for a MOU, just subject partner PSF2, and we'll somebody from the team will start that partnership, and now we can facilitate putting your logos on when we finally do the launch, as well as a much heavier of a exchange and collaboration. What does that look like for academics in the past? So for example, University of Michigan, we actually had their entire sort of a privacy research team literally look at this framework in version 1.0 and help develop that, and then afterwards review that. That could be true for any think tank. You literally supply like 20 odd researchers and then give back a very comprehensive review afterwards. So all those type of collaborations are possible in exchange for, it's simply, it's going to go to so many governments. so many big tech corporations, so many policymakers, because this is going to be a year where most of the governments look to, I mean, back in the days in 2011, when I started cybersecurity career, there were 7 to 11 governments that had cybersecurity positioning statement. So this pivot, now we're going to have like lots of governments make positioning statement for immersive and emerging technologies. I don't know if you guys have noticed, OSTP actually last week released a list of specific technologies: virtual reality, augmented reality, human-computer interaction. It is one of those fast-track emerging technology. It's on their list. And so already they have a committee at the OSTP level that is already being formed, whether that's based on our recommendation or not, but that's another topic. But yeah, so please reach out for this partnership and collaboration, or encourage your organization to do so.
And then, yeah, the last slide is just contact information, our master docs, master PDF documents. I know we have a calendar link here that, is that for today's?
Yeah,
No.
so I believe that's the other part. We're not going to be sending you individual notification to attend the meetings. Basically, you can go to the Notion page, and Panujit, if you could put in the chat just the links for Notion, that contains all of these resources. So we've created an external Notion page for XRSI PSF 2.0 is what we are calling Privacy Safety Framework. You can go to that Notion page, explore calendar. We have Signal. We also have a Slack channel. Anybody wants to get added to it, need to basically request that by just either emailing, or you can email to either of us and we'll be able to help you out. I believe we went through this quickly because it really is a two-way process. So we wanted to take most of the questions. And the way to do it, because I know we have about 91 people here, is if you could please raise your hands so that we could, one by one take those questions. And let me look at it from the gallery view.
And it looks like Kavya and Deborah, we got some feedback here from a couple of folks regarding nonprofit not being listed in the interest form. And so we might just want to add nonprofit.
Oh, okay.
There.
Gotcha. So yeah, Bhanuji, if you could stop sharing and then just like share the links with the chat in the chat would be great. And so one thing we will do is after this, we will send out a mass email, including the recording, as well as all these links are embedded in the slides. So you will receive the slide deck as well as the recording link. So you'll be able to see that. Here is the Notion where you can go. Oh, there you go. Thanks, Manujit. So any questions? I'm really curious because we left a bit of a time. If you have any questions, we kind of zip through it in half an hour. One of the questions I think everybody might have is, what is the scope of technologies that we are going to cover? And that is, previously based on version 1.1, we have augmented reality, mixed reality, virtual reality, which is all the umbrella terms for XR, but related technologies such as artificial intelligence, brain-computer interfaces. We now know that Facebook has already kind of taken the gloves off. So it's all about robotics as well. We will dive into privacy preserving technologies such as homomorphic encryption. Previously, we haven't done a deeper dive into it, but this is exactly the moment where we go much, much deeper, because things like these things, there may even be aspects of reviewing, and I've been reviewing Solid for, sort of privacy preserving technologies. We might review NDN network is another avenue where, it's another protocol for privacy preserving tech. So let's hear from Dylan.
Hi, thanks Kavya, thanks Fox, so much for putting this together. I just had a question around when it comes to the audience for this and the kind of deliverables. So I represent XR Access, which is a nonprofit focused on accessibility for people with physical and cognitive disabilities to XR. And one thing that we're always thinking about, is this, when we're making a deliverable, is this something that's going to be for content creators that we need to focus on, like the specifics of best practices or open source materials and code snippets, versus is this something for politicians who might be able to secure resources for XR or put in regulations? And so I was really curious where you see who you see being the primary audience for some of the deliverables that XRSI is putting together right now.
And I could respond to that. And I would also direct people with a similar question to a link. Let me see. It is the one from the Safety Commissioner of Australia. Let me see if I have the link right here. Yeah, it's esafety.gov.au/SBD. So that's the safety by design. This is almost very similar to what we have in mind. So safety by design, currently it's already coded into a toolkit. So the output of such an effort should be ideally, preferably a toolkit where you can, as a content creator or as a small medium business or a much larger organization or as a policymaker, could potentially pick your spot, and accordingly, that's why all these controls are kind of coded, and accordingly, it should be able to spit out to you, just like you'll notice in the safety by design toolkit, the applicable control items. And of course, it's going to gather a bit of your data in terms of like how many employees you have, are you a content creator, what are the technologies you're dealing with? So it would have to be a scoping process for yourself, and thereafter it would be able to, hopefully, the toolkit will be able to assist you in terms of like with respect to your specific scope. And if it doesn't apply, that scope is not applied, then it should at least give you a reasonable answer, which, in the security, people who are familiar with cybersecurity have reasonable controls in place. So at least it will be something. We always at XRSI say we are starting with like, drawing a line in the sand, which was drawn in 2020. It was all about, hey, what all are we dealing with? What all should be the problem? Vulnerable population, AI biases. Like we crafted like the problem sets. This time around, we're going to dive into how and the configurations, and most likely, like a much larger scope than was what we initially started with, because the industry's moved quite a bit. So I hope that answers your question, Fox. But the effort itself is going to be about all kinds of scope. And that's why it has to be multidisciplinary, because it has to satisfy the need of the industry from various different angles, from a content creator perspective, from a developer's perspective. Like, just saying, oh, responsible innovation, here's 5 things to do. That is not how responsible innovation works. You really have to give a content creator or a developer a concrete configuration that would enable a environment to be, let's say, accessible, so just an example.
Gotcha, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
We had a question from the audience, which was, will there be a lead per focus area to drive the weekly meetings and content development? I think we're your leads. What we did last time is that we did have like breakout groups, and we may find that certain individuals are maybe better fitted for the different focus areas. For right now, what we want to be able to do is drive it with Kavya, with Deborah, our support team, Kirby, Banujit, so that we've got some infrastructure in place to keep the momentum going forward. If we find that certain individuals are maybe better fitted for certain parts of the focus areas, then that's the way we'll play it out. We want to be as collaborative as we can possibly be, and still make deadline.
Yeah, exactly. And these 4 focus areas are broken into, so we'll spend 2 months each on each of these focus areas. Within that, we have 14 functions. So at some point, if we determine that this large chunk of work could be segmented and we've found a natural leader, we will totally do it. But to begin with, it's all going to happen under the leadership of Deborah. There is a very specific reason for that also, because Deborah knows a lot of DLT stuff. We want to, over time, eventually turn this into a autonomous, decentralized sort of a mechanism that is, technically feasible to turn it into a democratic process. We don't know what that would look like, but definitely I look to Deborah's leadership to guide us through that, and everyone else as well to provide the input. Hey, Alina.
Hey, Kavya, just one quick question. I don't know if you saw my question earlier in the chat. As you know, we expanded under 1.2 last year, but the whole topic list. Have you guys already prepared sort of certain add-on aspects or other topics that haven't been finished under 1.2 that we definitely need to revise? Is there a list that we could sort of add on to? Other topics that are on the radar just to sync with what you've guys been cooking and we as newbies on the block can add to it?
That's a really good question, Alina. So you'll see in the 2.0 preparation, because we have to preserve all the evidence as a standard developing organization. So we preserved all the 1.1 evidence and then updated all these documentation to 2.0. So when you go to the master Excel sheet, and let me see if I can just quickly pull it up for everyone's just, sort of familiarity's sake. I know the link is on the last slide, so let me pull that up, the Excel sheet. That was my bad. This is the Excel sheet. Let's see. Let me go to Notion. And so if you go to Notion, you'll be able to see that there is a master working copy here. So within the shared resources, you'll see the master working Excel sheet. And that Excel sheet, everybody should get access to it. You can request access, and we want to capture who is requesting access. So you really do have to request access. Now, when you go here, you'll see some of the yellow areas. These are the areas that did not receive lots of love last time around. So there are a few areas that do not have comprehensive research from 1.1. So Alina, to your point, these are some of the areas that are like deficient in a comprehensive research at the moment. Then there are other areas that we removed. So this is something child safety. We're going to turn this into its own framework. So these controls will be deleted from here. So in turn, these are just like very agile controls and items. Harm prevention, for example, as we said, for harm prevention, we're going to lean on safety by design. And if you go further into these documents, so you will be able to access the master Excel sheet. We would only allow limited access to what we are currently working on, but you're welcome to request for further access. And this is kind of what the research looks like. A lot of people just put a lot of different resources, people have been working on and other research items. You can also share it all together. So like we've done that with British Health Services, NHS, and they were working on a large project. And then we had meetings with their scientists to just kind of receive all this information in the back end and then upload it and align it with our research. With version 1.1, we did that. So I'll stop sharing there. Alina, does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you. Just basically, all the work last year was not for nothing. So we are using that, and you guys highlighted the sections exactly. Thank you for your answer that ties into it.
Yeah, thanks. Totally. Thank you. I think there's some question in the chat. Seems like Kevin. Kevin, do you want to unmute, share the questions if you like, to follow up from Alina?
Yes, I'm focusing on the human teaming subgroup of human-computer interaction, specifically for a paper going into the International Aerospace Congress regarding off-world habitats where state actors or corporations may own that habitat. So I just want to ask if there's any thinking in the current group regarding where state actors or corporations can say, well, this is our place, just like at a place of work we'd all deal with, but in specifically protecting our privacy there, where AI will be running all the operations, just so that we don't have a locked-in surveillance state in those habitats. So that's my main question.
Yeah, Kavya, I think that dovetails with some of the concerns that were brought up last go around, which had to do with protected areas and opt-in, default opt-out as opposed to default opt-in when it comes to like volumetric capture or sensor fusion capture of an environment. The example Kavya was giving, Kevin, at that time had to do with like restrooms or areas that where we expect some level of privacy. So that has come up, and I believe it made it into several areas in our documents.
Yeah, I think you're talking about context, right, Fox? So within the inform section, when you talk about context, so what all different type of context? I don't know whether nation state actors or
Right.
autonomous AI specific context will emerge, but it all depends, from various input. If the context emerges that we need to tackle how a contextualized AI is providing permissions for various different tasks, then that must be addressed. At least a reasoning must be given why is that not addressed in the framework. So since you have already mentioned it, obviously it should be tackled in the framework somewhere.
Thanks for that, Kevin.
Thank you.
And thanks for sharing that list. That's exactly what I was talking about. I'm like, okay, thank God I'm not the only nerd who tracks all these things.
It looks like we have a question from Abraham.
Hello. Yeah, well, so thanks for putting this together. This looks amazing and awesome. So I had a quick question about the timeline again. I think I might have missed it, but it felt so there were like, I think like 4 different controls or like the broad level things, and you said you were going to work 2 months on them each. So does that mean that they will be like only focusing on one control, finishing that before moving on, or are they working in parallel? Or like, for example, like, if I want to focus on one particular one, will I only be like 2 months of the remaining 8 working on it, or want to get a sense of the timeline and how they'll work in parallel or separate?
Yeah, so we didn't want to end up in the same scenario as we did last time, which is we were working on a lot of things in parallel and they were all kind of half done. So what we really wanted to do is make sure that there was enough structure around the timeline for each one that we knew that there was a deadline, so a 2-month deadline for each one. What we're still thinking about is whether we can do the first 2 within the 2 months and then actually do the last 2 in parallel, so they would actually take up 4 months apiece. But we're not sure yet, and we want to make sure that we understand our velocity as a group before we make that decision. So as of right now, it will be 2 months on each one. But if we can maintain a certain velocity, it may open up halfway through this initiative that we do the last 2 focus areas in parallel.
And that is for the individual contributors. At least that's what we're starting out with, just because we have a little bit of a sense of what all are we dealing with, like in terms of what all expertise do we have in our camp. So at least we will start the first session with the assumption that we are going linear and not branching out in different groups. So Abraham, you have been with this framework development from the very conception of it, and you contributed to the first one as well via University of Michigan, and then 1.1 as well. So when it comes to organizational collaboration, any moment an organization can say, hey, we want to really work with you with harm prevention, just like safety by design principles. And we will supply to you this particular segment research, then of course that is welcomed anytime. So organizational wise, we can certainly talk about it in the back end, like, okay, you just want to address this one big chunk. Maybe there is a training organization or a research focused on training. So there is a whole emphasis on awareness and training for these technologies, and that's a very specific section. So you can certainly do that. Except when it comes to individual contributors and our working groups, we will start at least with Dennis, Deborah, myself, and Panujit. Panujit, I don't know if you are on camera, but wave to us. I know you're somewhere here. And then Kirby, Panujit is our project manager, who is going to be, helping us with all sorts of logistical requirements and stuff. So we're trying to kind of keep it a bit more concise in the beginning, and then we'll be able to then address like, okay, there is a very clear-cut leader for mapping these things. Last year, Data Diva, I don't know if you're here, Debbie Reynolds, helped us map things to specific compliance frameworks. So those kinds of groups may emerge still. And Abraham, from you guys at the University of Michigan, you mapped it out to various other stuff as well and provided the feedback. And all of that is still like part of this framework, and all that is possible. I hope that doesn't make it too like gray, like we're going to start with this approach and then see how it goes. Hope that answers it.
Yeah, thank you so much.
I know there might be other questions. One more thing that I think it's worth sharing is that XRSI is looking to turn this effort into facilitating fellowship programs. So individual contributors will be eligible to a fellowship. And so you can please inquire with me directly, or you can send an email to info@xrsi.org for what that means to become a XRSI fellow, what are the requirements, and it is still a very early stages. Probably 2 or 3 months down the line, we'll be able to announce it much more widely as to what the actual requirements, expectations, roles, and responsibilities are. I know Kirby, who is the lead researcher on this. Kirby, I don't know if you want to wave to everybody and say hello, but there are researchers who have individually expressed interest who would potentially become a XRSI fellow. And to be able to claim that just within this window of like from today to 10th of December, that's the work. That's all we have to do for, this type of a fellowship to be available. So I think that's pretty awesome. I'm in the line myself. So I hope people are excited. Any other questions? Hey, Valentino, made it. And I wonder, Didier, good to see you here. And I see Sarina as well. I know you guys have been active. Didier, you've been pretty active on the education side. Do you have any questions, Didier, or any comments on this? In fact, it would be great to hear from you, since you've been kind of, partner and from the very beginning kind of involved in the process.
Hi, thank you, Kavya, and good to be part of this, 2.0 kickoff. And I know Ricky Laforce from University of Michigan, one of our early partner in crime, is also on the call. So no, I think we are very excited to participate. I definitely very much appreciate all of the thoughts in organizing the effort. We know that there is always a lot of energy and a lot of contribution. And so I think the plan execution is going to be great. I guess the only question is, just to confirm with 2.0, we're really focusing on the risk management and not, overall, and not necessarily having some focus like we try to have with 1.1 on some, areas, right? So it's going to be a very inclusive approach. Is that kind of a good way to summarize it?
Definitely. And that's Deborah's vision. If Deborah deems it appropriate that we must focus on one particular area, which is currently not the case, at least we are leading with the assumption that it would be focused on more like technology that brings about very novel type of risks to different organizations and individuals. How do we address it with a human-centric approach that doesn't put vulnerable population at risk? Because, there's a tremendous amount of development that has happened on the AI side. And we need to sort of break those silos and kind of encompass these technologies. There's a lot of solutions that are being built on the DLT side, and Deborah will tell you. And I think we need to understand and combine these things to come up with a more comprehensive approach to address risk.
And I think that makes perfect sense. So I'll just summarize, from an academic perspective, right? I think, from a university perspective, I think where that makes a lot of sense is that we have to envision a futures where, the students basically, they will use a technology throughout the day. And so it's, good that we don't necessarily focus this in one very specific narrow use case, right? And they are also going to have to be made aware of the concern and the challenges throughout their entire life. So that kind of, from, cradle to grave, basically, I think is going to be great. Thank you.
And that's an excellent point. And so, obviously this is a risk framework, right? So that where does risk really within an organization get assessed? It's usually like the GRC function or somewhere embedded within security or privacy, right? Separately. But to that point, it can feel a little static in that, I mean, even though it's like a flywheel, right? I mean, it could feel like a little one note. And so I'm working on the vision. I just came to this program, but I agree with you completely. Like we need more than that. And we need to fit it into a combination of how nomenclature is being discussed around XR, the metaverse, whatever. We want to be able to neatly fit and kind of productize, what does it look like? Like what are a set of documents we can give or guidance for privacy by design in the building of products and services, but also what does it look like for privacy engineers, and what does the tech stack look like? And and we don't have to do all of this ourselves. I mean, there's other organizations we can partner with, other people to bring in, and I don't have for today what my vision is for the overall program, but you can rest assured that it's going to be more comprehensive than the risk framework itself. It's just amazing work that's been done so far. So what's great for anyone who's just getting involved right now is that there's a lot to opine on. There's already not just bones on the framework, but an actual kind of framework in place. There's just certain aspects need to be fleshed out a little more with use cases or with different contexts, and it's a real great opportunity now to kind of add to that meat, and get involved wherever we all come from different disciplines. And what's so exciting is that we need these various disciplines to even understand the crossovers with the crypto space, right? Like you have to understand like economic theory and as well as security, as well as identity management. And so all of these areas from cryptography to, just privacy engineering technologies, they're all going to be embedded in this program overall.
And real quickly, I see that either Jessel or Richard Foster, I know Richard sent a Firefly, but Jessel, do you want to unmute and sort of talk about the AI risk assessment or AI and XR intersections that we researched the last time around with version 1.1, and maybe a little bit of what that process looked like? Because we partnered up with MKAI, and we basically said, hey, we want to explore the risks around AI and XR. So Jessel, do you have any comments on that? I see you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we teamed up with a couple of team members who are the MKI champions working into the expertise of various areas, be it Monica or Jerry, and likewise. And then looking at the various sections within the version 1.1 index, we were able to add insights, be it healthcare or the risks around childcare, around privacy, the human rights, etc. So I think, and also considering the intersection between XR and AI, both, and the automation journey itself, or what could be the risks to the hygiene conditions, the mental health, the vulnerable groups, etc. So looking at the various personas and the sectors and the intersection between AI and XR, all those aspects together, we were able to assess the risks together and submit it to the framework that Kavya had prepared. So based on the index, I think that is the key summary I could just think of at the top of my head.
Thanks, Jaisal. And one thing to be noted, a couple of the researchers involved at MKAI, they wrote their own white paper after the whole research that, intersection of AI and XR. So because you get to keep your IP and everything, this research could literally lead you to write a whole another PhD, because there's a lot of challenges that we're going to be solving together.
Absolutely. Thanks, Kavya, for adding that. Yes, we were able to do that with all the information that was collected. It was a whole bunch of around 11 documents that we assessed. We were able to come up, and then that could be turned into a white paper. Yes.
Exactly. Another example would be NHS actually has something called as DTAC. It's the Digital Assessment Checklist, technology checklist. And so they pretty much were able to, at least at the moment, the effort is to understand what XRSI is doing and update their own checklist for NHSX, for NHS HEE. So sometimes, we're quite helpful in this exchange is always two ways. So it's not just like we're receiving knowledge, we're also like exchanging and producing stuff that people just don't know of. Any other questions? If not, there is about 2 minutes. Deborah, I would, and Dennis, I would leave it to you for any closing remarks.
Well, we've gotten a couple of inputs regarding users with disabilities and whether they've come up in the documents. There are so many sections. I'm trying to remember off the top of my head, because I do think that we had SMEs last go around. I can't remember specifically how we captured that. So this is up to Dylan and I think Luis. We'll take a look in there, but I would highly suggest you check out the consent form, fill in the interest form so that you can have access to it, because even if it is in there, it may not be in there in a way that you are that your expertise could improve upon. So I'll take a look and see if I can circle back with you all. But definitely we want you all to be taking the time to look through it and seeing if it matches with what you expected to see.
And Fox, I had a quick question on that, just when it comes to accessibility. We've collaborated with a couple of different organizations on stuff like this. We just are working with the IEEE XR Ethics Initiative, for example, to make sure that their accessibility portions kind of reflect the best practices. How does, when it comes to the content for this, obviously we don't want to just copy paste things, but reusing a lot of those kind of works that have already been done. What's the policy when it comes to XRSI about that type of utilization?
Yeah, so we've been referencing, just like a white paper or a research paper, we've been referencing any insights that we've gathered from studies or from other standardizations. And that way we can give credit to the folks that have done that work while also expanding on it.
And more on the policy side is in the license agreement. This is very much because, this went through multiple rounds and hundreds of researchers kind of weighing in and kind of pushing back, like this is something viable. So ultimately, this seems to sit very well with most of the multidisciplinary people because they get to keep their research, they can use it wherever, they can launch it wherever. We just want permission to use. And every time we will potentially collaborate with XR Access directly on accessibility for sure. We have a few members in our coalition, D&I coalition, who literally are the XR Access members. So we'll just, credit them and potentially refer back to their research. But one of the main component is to never reinvent the wheel, because there is literally, it's like the XKCD comic book where people wanted standards, and then now we have 51 standards because there was a global standard. So I don't know if you know what I'm talking about, but yeah, maybe I should tweet it out later. But yeah, that's not the goal. The goal is to really help people be more safe and inclusive, and not just try to be a hero. We made a standard or something.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think we'd definitely be happy to kind of pitch in and say, hey, here's the latest.
You found the XKCD. Yeah, that's always handy. Deborah, any closing remarks, and then I guess we'll close the meeting.
Just I'm super excited about how many people have even expressed interest in joining the next phase of this framework. If there's anything that you want to reach out to me, you can find me easily on LinkedIn, or I'm Deborah at XRSI.org. Glad to talk about ways, whether it's like business development or ways to partner together for greater effect. Or you can obviously reach out to Kavya for that as well. But once I have my vision in place as to where we're working towards at a program level, I'm delighted to share it with everyone and get feedback. But just happy to be on board. This is, I don't know what my first official week, second official week, Kavya, I forget exactly, but I'm just delighted to be part of this organization and on this project in particular.
Thank you so much. Thanks, everyone. And thanks, Kavya, for sharing that link as well. This is an event about naming the harms, and we're going to partner up and maybe work with Kavya, who is an amazing identity expert. There's a very specific section on identity. The fun part about that, though, is it's not just going to be a dry identity is this or self-sovereign identity. Extending reality will give us an opportunity to look at it from more philosophical perspective. What does it mean to be a furry? Who am I when I can be a room? So I think the reflection in this research could go much deeper with respect to what does consciousness mean when you combine, your identity, potentially assign it to a artificial intelligence agent, and you are no longer kind of controlling the avatar. You've given a de facto proxy. It's lots of fun stuff. I'm really excited. Kavya is here, and all the folks that are like participating. So hopefully we'll see you in a few weeks. I think the next session, Fox, is 10th, I believe.
I think it is. Yeah, we'll send a calendar invite to everyone, or put it in the Notion so that we can all get to it in the same place.
Yep. So we'll update the Notion constantly. We won't send a very direct invite to a meeting. We'll always just update the calendar. So your source of truth is that Notion. There is the calendar, there is the Signal chat group, there is the Slack that you can ask for permission. Bhanujit is going to be the person who will address your logistical, inquiries and requests. So anything that you don't have access to, anything that you want to, talk about, partner up, all of that stuff, like Bhanujit is going to be central to this whole effort. And of course, all of us are right here. You can email anytime at info@ or Dennis at, Deborah at, myself, Kavya at XRSI.org, and we'll respond back. I guess we are 5 minutes over, but thank you, everybody. Really, really appreciate it. Let's keep the traction going, because that's something that we observed last time too, is like we start really, really strong. We just need to keep this momentum as we move forward. So that's the one thing that, any ideas to keep people engaged and, involved are really, really welcomed. And we are willing to pivot and adjust the pace and the approaches. I know Deborah remains very flexible, and we are also very flexible here. Like, whatever you advise would be taken into consideration as long as it's effective. So thank you, everyone. I hope you have a great rest of the week. We'll see you along the journey as we go through this process.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.